how did they do their preaching work? What methods did they use? The film continues.
By 1914, there were 5,000 Bible students preaching in 68 lands. The world's population was approaching 2 billion. Was there a way to reach more people in less time? New technologies had opened up a possibility.
The photodrama of creation is presented by the IBSA, the International Bible Students Association. Its aim is public instruction along religio-scientific lines and in defense of the Bible as the inspired Word of God.
The Bible students did something that had never been done before. By synchronizing slides and film footage with music and dialogue, they produced an 8-hour audio-visual presentation. The idea was to show the development of God's purpose from the beginning of creation to the millennial reign of Christ. It was shown in 2-hour segments over 4 nights. The first part dealt with each of the creative days. The flood of Noah's day. And the faith of Abraham. Part 2 showed scenes of God's dealings with ancient Israel. From the Exodus through the reign of the Judean kings. The third segment dealt with the destruction of Solomon's temple and messianic prophecies and their fulfillment. In Part 4, viewers saw the story of the spread of Christianity, the persecution that resulted, and the huge populations yet to be reached with the kingdom message. Showings were organized so that 80 cities could be served each day. The Bible students themselves paid all expenses needed to rent suitable theaters. The photodrama of creation was a technical feat previously unmatched. It would be another decade before a full-length commercial film would combine music, synchronized dialogue, and color footage. In just 1 year, 9 million people around the earth had seen the photodrama of creation. And many who saw it were convinced that they had discovered the path of increasing light.
The photodrama used hand-painted glass slides like these, other than the film footage that they shot. And these glass slides each had a picture on it that they used as part of their illustration of their lectures. It was the PowerPoint slides of the day. Now, there are a lot of magic lantern slides, as it was called back in the day, that they were able to purchase from other companies. But some of these, when they purchased them or had them made, they hand painted the glass slides so that when they blew it up with the projector, or the magic lantern as it's called, they would see a color photo. A lot of these in my collection here are just tinted one color, but that color of course would be projected on the screen. Now, these glass slides are pretty heavy, but the projector itself is also big, and it looks like it could do enough damage to to cut someone with all the sharp metal edges hanging off of the end of it. There are different kinds of lenses that could be used depending on how far away from the screen or how big you needed to project it. It was the PowerPoint slides of the day. And the bulbs get quite hot. The bulb gets hot enough that it could actually melt glass slides. Now, what they would do when they would show these slides is that they would pull out the corresponding lecture that was recorded on various records. Now, these are shellac, they're not vinyl, and shellac is a hard resin that they were able to get from certain bugs. If you could speak loud enough, you could actually etch on the record itself. If you had a weak voice, then wouldn't work as well. And that's what happened with the Angelophone records, where Russell tried to give a lecture about various hymns. He was unable to get his voice out loud enough to be able to make the impression on the shellac, to be able to reproduce a good sound. So this is why for the photodrama, when it's not Russell on camera at the time, it's an actor, a professional lecturer. Whenever Russell's on the screen and he's talking, what they did is they first recorded his lecture, and then when he was on stage, they would play that back out loud and he would lip sync it. Finally, when they showed it to the public, they would start the film and they knew exactly when to drop the needle on the record so that it would appear that the voice was synchronized with the mouth. They didn't develop sound for film until several years later, and they actually were able to record the audio on the film itself. But back in this day, this was being creative and trying to figure out a way to make it look like there was actually sound, synchronized sound with the film. As far as I understand, this was the first film that was able to do that. This was the first really literal talking film. But the film is also made out of nitrate material, and that nitrate is quite flammable. It can spontaneously combust or even just melt randomly, and so that's what happened to some of this film. So a lot of the films are lost from that time period because of that. Now, as stated earlier with the Angelophone records, what they tried to do was record some lectures on some various hymns and then have the hymn on the reverse side of the record. Unfortunately, to be able to get the needle to etch enough into the substance to create a good recording. With Russell's voice being so weak, that was a difficult process. This is why the recordings of Russell's voice with the Angelophone records are quite poor. The recordings were so poor that people were disappointed, and what they had to do was hire a professional lecturer to re-record them.
After the church has been glorified, and the time comes for giving the knowledge of the truth to the world in general, it is God's order that this blessing also shall be to the Jew first. Hearken to the apostles' words, and then all Israel shall be saved from blindness and come to a knowledge of the truth.
Okay, Jeff, those are the glass slides you're holding in your hand.
Yeah.
Okay, where did you get the glass slides from? People have the pictures. I know that in the books and that people, but you've got the real slides. How'd you come across them?
I cannot give away my sources.
Oh, again with that.
You know, we've mentioned that several times in some of our earlier stories, but some people have been very kind to me. People from all sorts of denominations who have contributed to the cause and trying to help us behind the scenes in order to build a library and build the documentation for where did all this come from and what happened. to Watchtower Society. Where did it begin? Where did it end? Exactly what we're discussing now in our Faith in Action review.
And how heavy are those slides, roughly? What would you...
They're pretty heavy. So I have a case, and you'll see it in you saw in the video earlier. And these cases are about as heavy as a sack of potatoes. It's pretty heavy. Each of those cases with the glass slides in it. They're not light. There's actually another new book that just came out called Watchtower Society, IBSA, International Bible Students Association, Who's Who, by Bernhard Brabenec. The back of the book says, the encyclopedia Who's Who of the Bible Students, later Jehovah's Witnesses, mentions people who were active members prior to 1920 or were otherwise connected to their history. Although there were maybe only 30 to 50 really prominent Bible students, like C.T. Russell, J.A. Bonet, A.H. Macmillan, J.F. Rutherford, W.E. Van Amberg, in the period before 1920, another 4,000 names are mentioned here that can be found in the many publications of the Watchtower Society and other publishers. Often only names can be listed. In many cases, there are still some biographical information or a photo of the person concerned can be shown. Around 1,000 portrait photos are included. The list is far from being a complete one, as this hardly seems possible. But this brings us to the death of Charles Taze Russell and the start of the Rutherford era. And in researching the Rutherford era, we found several new things that we were unaware of, based on fact-checking the statements made in this Faith in Action film. Join us for more. To be continued.